2 bits for the lady. Going once.
The snow fell that night in crooked patterns, as if the sky itself had been torn and stitched together wrong. Lanterns flickered along the main street of the frontier town, their glass chimneys fogged by breath and frost. Men gathered tight around the wooden platform, boots crunching against ice, voices like ravens picking at something already wounded. In the middle stood Sadie Carver, a girl of 24, barefoot in the cold, her shawl slipping from her narrow shoulders. Her dark hair clung wet against her cheek, and shame clung closer still. She kept her eyes lowered, though every eye in town burned through her like a branding iron. She was not there as a woman tonight, only as a spectacle. The auctioneer's voice cracked through the winter air, gravel dragged over tin, and with each word her heart bent further toward breaking. The first bid was not a bid at all but a jeer. "A dime for a freak," someone shouted, and laughter shook the square. Sadie's breath turned sharp in her throat, smoke rising only to be swallowed by the jeering crowd. She tightened her arms across her chest, though nothing could hide her shame. Her mother had once told her that dignity was not a thing given by others, but earned quietly, kept fiercely. Yet what good was such a saying when the whole town gathered to strip it away? She tried to stand straighter, but her knees trembled like a colt in its first storm. Another voice carried over the laughter, higher this time. "She ain't worth the feed for a mule." The words broke over her like stones, and she thought she might fall where she stood. But then, through the storm of mockery, silence fell as one hand lifted at the back of the crowd. The stranger leaned against a post, a shadow among torches, his hat brim cutting his face in half. He did not laugh, nor jeer. His voice was steady, low, with the weight of iron behind it. $100. A gasp rippled through the men like wind bending grass. No one had expected such a price. Sadie's head jerked up against her will, eyes searching the dimness until they caught his, eyes not clouded with judgment, nor hunger, but something colder, steadier. He was younger than she thought he might be, no more than 28, though his gaze carried years that the world had pressed into him too soon. Whispers spread quick, Sundance Kid. His name curled through the crowd like smoke. The outlaw himself. Why would he raise a hand for her? The auctioneer's mouth hung open before the gavel struck. Wood against wood, the sound final as a coffin nail. The moment after stretched, fragile as ice on a thawing river. Sadie waited for the hand to grab her arm, to claim her as the others had wished. Instead, he stepped forward, moving with the looseness of a man who never feared chains, and set his coat, heavy, worn with trail dust, over her shoulders. It carried the faint smell of leather and smoke, nothing like the sour breath of the crowd. He said nothing, not even to the auctioneer who grumbled under his breath, but guided her through the ring of faces. Murmurs followed, some mocking, some envious, all burning. Sadie walked as if through a fire, every stare a brand. Yet the weight of his coat was anchor enough to keep her upright. At the horse he lifted her gently, not by the arm like a possession but by the elbow, steady as one lifts a wounded bird. She dared a whisper, trembling on her tongue. "What will you do with me?" His silence was sharper than any blade, and for a moment she thought he might not answer at all. But he only looked ahead, jaw hard, and led the horse into the snow. The ride was long and quiet, the moon their only lantern, the crunch of hooves the only drum. Sadie shivered beneath the coat, her body small in its folds, while questions gnawed at her chest. Who was this man that bought her? Was she safer with an outlaw than with the cruelty of the town? Each time she dared to glance at him, his face was pale in the moonlight, carved in shadows like stone. He did not look at her, nor away, only forward. The wind stung her cheeks and she thought she might break beneath the silence. But when she swayed with weariness, his hand steadied the reins and by extension, her. Curiosity curled around her heart like smoke. Why had he not touched her, not mocked her, not claimed her as the others would have done? The cabin appeared at last, half buried in snow, smoke curling weakly from its chimney. He opened the door and the smell of pine smoke met her, a soft heat against the rawness of the night. Inside, the walls were plain, wood darkened with age, a table scarred by knives and firelight. He set kindling to flame, and soon the hearth whispered, orange light crawling across the floor. On the table he placed bread, rough-cut and hard, and a tin cup of coffee steaming into the cold air. His gesture was wordless, an invitation without insistence. Sadie's fingers trembled as she reached, breaking bread between hands that had been shaking since the square. She ate slowly, her throat tight with both hunger and shame. Across from her he sat, sharpening his knife with a whetstone, eyes lowered, every motion deliberate. The silence grew heavy, pressing against her ears until she asked again, voice no louder than the crackle of fire, "Why me?" His gaze lifted at last, shadowed by the flame, and he said, "You looked tired. Thought maybe you deserved rest." Tears threatened then, stinging at the corners of her eyes. She tried to blink them back, but words tumbled out, raw and halting. They laugh at me, say I'm cursed, say I ain't fit for a man." Her voice broke. She hated herself for letting him hear it, hated the wetness on her cheeks, hated the weakness her body betrayed. He set down the knife, folded a quilt, and laid it on the bed across the room. His voice, when it came, was as soft as pine ash. "You'll sleep here, that's all." He did not offer comfort, nor denial, nor promise. Only the simple act of giving her a place where no one would look at her as less than human. The fire popped in the silence, throwing sparks into the air, and Sadie bowed her head, letting her tears fall at last, hidden behind her hair. Later that night came the sound of boots in the snow. Harsh voices cut through the cold. "You stole her from us." Sadie froze, breath caught in her throat, terror clawing back into her chest. She pressed against the cabin wall as the door opened, Sundance stepping into the night. The men from the square stood in the glow of torches, their sneers hungry. He held his revolver low at his side, the barrel catching the firelight, his stance unshaken. "She ain't yours," he said, calm as stone. "She's with me." The words did not sound like claim, but like protection. For a long moment, silence stretched. Then the men spat curses into the snow and backed into the dark. Sadie trembled, hearing the crunch of their retreat, her body taut until the door closed again. He returned to his chair, revolver laid across his knee, as though nothing had passed. Sadie watched him then, firelight playing against the hollows of his face, and felt her heart tremble with something she could not name. Gratitude, perhaps. Fear softened into awe, awe into the strange warmth of safety. She whispered thanks, her voice small in the crackle of fire. He nodded, nothing more, yet the gesture was weight enough to steady her. She lay upon the bed, quilt pulled to her chin, and for the first time in years her breath eased slow, her body uncurled from shame. He did not look at her, only kept his back to her, eyes fixed on the window, revolver resting easy, guarding her without claim, without demand. The firelight flickered against the walls, shadows climbing like spirits. Sadie closed her eyes, and the world grew still. And in that stillness, as sleep began to claim her, a thought came soft as prayer. Perhaps a body was not cursed, nor a soul marked for shame. Perhaps dignity could be given back by the smallest grace of another. Yet even as she drifted into her first true rest, she knew the night was not done. Outside, the snow fell heavier, and somewhere in the dark the sound of boots whispered again across the frozen ground.